Inflation is ripping through the economy. I mean, it's creating damage everywhere, and we are hitting all-time highs. Canada just hit a 39-year high, 8.1%. Unbelievable. Now, what can you do about it? Let's get into it. If we head right into our screen right here, I'm going to share this with you. Let's add this to the stream and let me show you a little bit about what we're talking about. And this is all the reasons why we are heading into such terrible times. Now, if we look at the debt clock, can you see the debt clock here is at $456 billion. Now, when you look at that, you're like, oh my goodness, this is really serious, right? 400 doesn't sound bad. This is the provincial debt. This is the same as if the US had individual debts for each state. This is state debt, which is absolutely unbelievable. But if you go and look at what the actual Canadian debt is, the Canadian debt is way, way higher. We're talking about in over $1 trillion. Now, that doesn't sound a lot to the Americans, right? Because the Americans have so much more debt. Now, we're going to get into that as well. So Canada's federal debt is sitting just about 1.2 trillion, which has blown up. It has doubled since the pandemic, same as the majority of the G7 countries. Now, in this, if we go and look at another article, which is an even bigger problem, is Canadian governments now are going to be handing everyone a $243,000 bill. Is it really $243,000? Not really, but we know it is coming. So look at this. Unfunded liabilities in Canadian pension plans and healthcare programs are another $2.2 trillion. $2.2 trillion. And this oftentimes comes down to demographics. If you look at demographics here, 1956, only 7% of Canadians were 65 years older. Then the proportion doubled to 15.3% in 2013. Now it's going to be 25%, they're estimating, by 2061. As all these boomers are aging, we have a very bad problem with our unfunded liabilities. Now, how do we think of unfunded liabilities? When you're thinking of unfunded liabilities, the really easy way to think about it, I do, is when we're talking about children. Imagine you had a kid. Now you might have a bill from the hospital. You may have to go and buy a whole bunch of things, strollers around the house. But is that all the bills that you're going to have to pay? No, because you know that that kid is going to keep eating for the next 18, 20 years, as long as he's at home. You're going to have to pay for schools, pay for braces, pay for whatever. That's an unfunded liability, meaning you don't have the money today, but you know you got to get it somewhere tomorrow. The same thing for countries. Countries have promised their citizens safety, police or military. They've promised them clean water. They've promised them health care in some instances. In Canada, they promised them health care. In some countries, they have a base pension that they will pay them. This is all money that they know they will have to pay in the future, but they're not necessarily having any plans to pay for it today. They're like, that's tomorrow's problems. I'll deal with it tomorrow. But the unfunded liabilities is really the problem that I think is going to be hitting everybody with this tsunami. So if we continue down that road, now let's take a look at our US friends. Now, Canada and the US are tied at the hip. Canada provides a lot of the raw goods to the United States. And so if we look at this, look at the US national debt at $30 trillion. Shocking, okay? It's skyrocketing, but their unfunded liabilities is an even bigger problem. If you scroll down on this is the usdebtclock.org. You can look at the US unfunded liabilities sitting at $170 trillion. So there is no possible way that these countries can get out of this kind of debt. How do you get out of this kind of debt? I mean, the countries have been doing it for centuries. And this is where they print money. So if we look at another site, the tradingeconomics.com, you can look up the Canadian money supply. It has consistently grown and grown and grown, and it looks like a sheer hockey stick. But if you look at a 5-year, you'll see that it actually looks parabolic during the COVID crisis that we've had. absolutely gone through the roof, which is a problem. If we look at the United States and we look at its max, it also looks like an absolute hockey stick that is going up. But if we look at the 5-year time frame, you can see immediately when we got shut down from the pandemic, the spending went through the roof. Now, whether or not you lean one way or another politically, whether we should have done it or should not, that's not the focus of our program. This is where we are. This is what is happening. So this is a very tough time. And this is what leads to these articles that show us that the inflation is going up right now. 8.1%, 39-year highs. Imagine that your employer decided to cut your pay. If your employer came to you today and said, we promise to cut your pay by 8.1%, cut it, not raise it, you would have an absolute fit. If the government said, we are now going to tax you 8.1% more per year, the governments, the citizens would absolutely have an absolute fit. But reason people don't go crazy over the inflation thing is they don't really understand it. All they know is that money is getting more expensive because their mortgages are going up. All they know is the cost of things are going up. That's a big problem. But it's kind of insidious because we don't see it coming and cooking us and hurting us slowly. But this is a very tried and true. And remember, as the governments print money, the debts of the country get cheaper and cheaper. So we have to be able to get on that as well. Now, if you go onto a site like shadowstats.com, we can see that in the 80s, we used to measure all of our CPI a different way. In the 80s, we would include the data and all of the costs associated with food, associated with energy, associated with housing, and we would calculate it one specific way. So in the 80s, we remember that they had to raise interest rates up to 17%, 20% in some cases to combat a 15% inflation. So remember, the interest rate had to be above what real inflation was. Now, this is the problem as we went on through the 80s, through the 90s, and especially now, they keep on changing the way that they calculate CPI. They do that by removing housing and fuel and food from the equation. So all we're left with is pencil erasers and televisions or something like that, so that their numbers could look even better and better. Nowadays, they're even substituting meat. So steak goes up and their hamburger could be replaced. They'll use that as the comparison, not steak versus steak over the years. So if we just calculated inflation the way that we did in the 80s, we actually would be sitting at, as based on shadowstats.com, around 17%. Absolutely crazy. So if we go and look at our food costs, now, just in Canada, they had this graph. They showed us that onions were up 25%, carrots up 23%, canned beans up 20, chicken breast up 20, cereal up 18, oranges up 14. The cost of everything is going up. And I know that you guys see this left, right, and center, right? We are seeing these prices go up and up and up over time, and it's shocking. It's hurting people. If you go look at the charts right now, we can see that the actual dollars in savings accounts in Canada and the States are actually dropping every month. We can also see as a country, the credit card usage is going up and up and up every single month. This is a problem, and this is showing us what's coming in the future. So as they leave the rates going up and up, we are going to be coming into more and more problems because people's savings will be drained out, more credit cards will be being used, and then we're going to have the big enchilada here when housing really starts to get hurt. So this is something that I think everybody should be paying attention to. There is a tidal wave of problems coming our way. So in conversations with clients all the time, we hear all kinds of different things about you don't know what's going to happen, or let's just see what's going to happen. But listen, there's a lot of economists, there's a lot of points of data out there, and there's a lot of noise. So you need to do something where we would call separating the wheat from the chaff. We have farmer friends. And so when it grows a stalk, there will be these little grains of wheat on there, and they have to beat it to get those couple grains of wheat off of it and separate the garbage that you don't like. Today, we seem to have a bit of a cancel culture where everybody wants to say, I don't like one thing that person said, so write them off completely. If that is something that is happening to you, I'm sorry, because that happens to me and everybody else as well. But when you read a book, there may be 99 things you agree with and one thing you don't agree with. So just still don't cancel the whole book. Take those 99 things that you really like out of it and keep on collecting those gold nuggets. One thing that I would be doing right now is, because you can see for yourself the cost of goods are going up and up and up. That is, to me, your best investment you can make today. Number one is books. Number two is buying the stuff you need. So how I think about it is if you need milk, let's say, and we can buy shelf stable milk that's good for a year, and I use 1 box a week. That means I can go buy 52 boxes or even 10 or buy 5. Just start bulking yourself up, because the need for the governments to print money in the future is only going to be going up and up and up. So the costs are going to be going up and up and up. So I think if you can stockpile for yourself something, it'll really, really help you. Every time you go do an order, buy 1 can of beans, buy 1 shelf stable thing of milk, and just start building yourself up. Of course, over time, I'm always telling you, you should always be investing a little bit of your money into things that are inflation proof, which is like something like this, like a silver round or a little gold coin or something. Just try to get a little bit of it, and so that you can be protecting yourself from inflation. Our big worry right now is what will happen in the future when it comes to housing prices. Now, let me be clear. What we have the question mark about is, what will the governments do? That is the question mark. So we never know if the governments are going to be raising rates or lowering rates. That's the question mark. Now, of course, there's all kind of economists guessing which way it's going to go, but that is going to be the guesswork, the question mark. Once the economy decides to raise rates, and especially now raise rates massively, super aggressively, once they do that, we already do know the trickle down effects of that. So that is not the question. So when people tell you, I don't know what's going to happen to interest rates, it's not, let's see what happens. It's, let's see what happens with the rate, and then there's the downstream effect. So let's break that down. Let's talk about that. If we are in Canada right now, I'm in Toronto. Everyone in Canada has to renegotiate their rates usually every 5 years. So if today they left the rates where they were, let's say they don't even touch them for 5 years, that means everybody who has a mortgage in the entire country will have to renegotiate their mortgages within 5 years. And there are hundreds of thousands of people that cannot afford the higher rates. Even if they left them where they are for 5 years, there's going to be massive implications by this as it goes down the road. We can see inflation is biting it out of everybody. Costs of goods are going up, savings are going down. That's a big problem. So I want everyone to do okay. The number one thing I would be doing now is buying books and educate yourself. You can go and see the list of books that I recommend that you read. It's the biggest ROI that you possibly have. Just start by reading something like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a classic, and start changing the way you think. Number two, I would be stockpiling goods that you have. Now, I'm not talking about like prepping for end of world Armageddon kind of stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that you should have a stockpile just to last you a while. We're coming up in a period where costs are going up and we could have shortages. And you guys have all seen the empty shelves that we've seen in the stores. So having something there could give you a little bit of peace of mind to know that you're going to be okay. And so by stocking up, the worst case scenario here is that you're going to save a lot of money because the cost of goods are going up. So you're going to save a lot of money, and let's hope that there is no shortages, but I can't see any way out of that. So I'm there for you guys. I really hope that you do well. Inflation is hurting, but remember, the people that it's hurting is the citizens and people who have too much debt. So the people who don't have too much debt are going to come out winning a lot, because we're going to be able to buy stocks and houses at really discounted rates. But the governments are the biggest beneficiaries of low rates, and they're the biggest beneficiaries of high inflation. So it's in their best interest to have it. So if you understand that part, you can understand why they're doing it. Guys, I wish you the best. I'm always here for your health, wealth, and happiness. I'll see you in the next video.